What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture, it's a place of history, it's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg for me is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment, what I saw these young African Americans doing, was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One-Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Good evening. You all made it out in this weather, so you might as well bring all the energy because you are here. So good evening. Welcome, welcome. I'll take the round of applause. Go ahead. Welcome to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. I'm Novella Ford, and I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions. Throughout the year, we offer over 70 free public programs that link our collections to new scholarship, the latest from authors across many genres, and programs that highlight the myriad of disciplines used to amplify Black history and culture. Thank you for joining us in Harlem for tonight's program, Photographic Archives and Legacy Building, with photographer and author of Last Day in Lagos, Marilyn Nance, Kwame S. Brathwaite, who is the son of Black is Beautiful photographer Kwame Brathwaite, and director of the Kwame Brathwaite Archive. And alongside him will be Dorothy M. Davis, who is the president of the Griffith J. Davis Photographs and Archives. Following the program, Marilyn Nance and Kwame Brathwaite will be available to sign books. Both those books are available in the Schomburg shop, as well as many other photography books, so I highly recommend stopping by the shop. Listen, it takes all my money too, so I definitely understand if you decide to skip it. Tonight's conversation is part of a series of programs around our current exhibition, The Ways of Langston Hughes, Griff Davis and Black Artists in the Making. I agreed to organize this exhibition at the Schomburg for two reasons. First, it featured a myriad of quotidian photographs of Langston Hughes, a writer, a poet whose work and legacy we experience every day at the Schomburg Center. As most of you all know, as you saw in the video, Langston Hughes' ashes are here, but he was a frequent visitor of the 135th Street Library that eventually became the Schomburg Center. But the second was an opportunity to introduce us to an under-recognized pioneer in Black history, Griffith J. Davis, who is an international photojournalist, as well as a pioneer in foreign service. Once I read their letters and telegrams, I knew this friendship between Davis and Hughes would become the vehicle for a photographic look at Hughes as an important catalyst for Black creativity and development. I hope you have some time to visit the exhibition in the Latimer Gallery. If you didn't do it beforehand, it will be open during the book signing following the program. It's National Poetry Month, so of course Langston Hughes made sense for us to celebrate, but we have so much more coming up during this month, including on April 17th, we have our Carnegie Hall Citywide, which is a free concert, and it features Aja Monet, who is a Brooklyn-born Surrealist blues poet, vocalist, activist, as well as composer. Now, I already know that that is going to probably fill up, so I highly recommend go ahead and RSVPing for that particular event. This week, we have Conversations in Black Freedom Studies that will focus on books related to food, life, and leisure, and that's on April 4th at 6 p.m. That is an online-only program, so it's great that you can watch it from the comfort of your home. Next week, we have Talks at the Schomburg, Black Curators Matter, which is part 3, as well as the end of this particular series. On this day, they'll explore issues of race and diversity between the 1990s and 2000s, and the ways that Black curators' commitment to institutional change have contributed to recentering Black culture as American culture. We have our Before 5 program, which is on April 16th, Searching for Augusta Savage, Then and Now. This particular program happens at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's a great lunchtime program, and it will feature a 22-minute short documentary about Augusta Savage, whose legacy has been reclaimed, has been repositioned, and also has been given back to us, this incredible artist of the Harlem Renaissance and then some. This is a documentary screening. We will also have a talkback with the filmmakers alongside Tammy Lawson, who is the curator of the Art and Artifacts Division here at the Schomburg Center, who's also in the room. So yeah, go ahead, give a wave, Tammy. Mm-hmm. She has been one of those people, one of the handful of people really who have been ensuring that the world knows about Augusta Savage. We are the largest holder of Augusta Savage sculptures here, so you'll also have a chance to have a hands-on experience or view of some of Augusta Savage's work. So if you are available from 1 to 2:30 p.m., we will have that program on April 16th. I'll also mention our annual Black Comic Book Festival. I know many folks love that and are used to it being in January. It's in April again this year. It's on April 26 and April 27. As you can see through our conversations, film screenings, exhibitions, performances, and more, we explore historical and contemporary narratives that continue to shape Harlem, this nation, and the world. So I invite you to learn more about the Schomburg Center as well as our upcoming programs by visiting our website at schomburg.org, and you can register for our programs at schomburgcenter.eventbrite.com. I'm going to ask you to take this time to silence your cell phone, and also please refrain from using flash photography. Our panel tonight represents photography and archives made over the last really 7 decades by culture-shifting photographers and those managing personal and familial legacies. Marilyn Nance, who across the last 5 decades has produced photographs of unique moments in the cultural history of the United States and the African diaspora, serving as a photographer for the U.S. delegation of the FESTAC 77, also known as the Second World Festival of Black and African Arts and Culture in Lagos, Nigeria. Nance made a very comprehensive photographic account of the festival and recently published her documentation of it in Marilyn Nance, Last Day in Lagos. Nance is a 2-time finalist for the W. Eugene Smith Award in Humanistic Photography. Her work is in the collections of the Brooklyn Museum of Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, among many others. Now, all of these people, their bios could be pages long, so I'm only giving you a little snippet, but you know what happens. You come here, you listen to them, and then you go down a rabbit hole, hopefully of Google, or you come and visit the Schomburg's collections and make those kind of connections, right? Also joining us, as I mentioned earlier, is Kwame Brathwaite, who is the son of photographer Kwame Brathwaite, and the director of the Kwame Brathwaite Archive. I want to say thank you to Kwame as well as Ms. Sokola Brathwaite, one, for being here this year. Today marks the day after the year of Mr. Brathwaite's passing, and he was such an important figure for us to understand Black is beautiful, for us to have this idea in our mind, and I'm grateful that we get to spend this time with you all here at the Schomburg Center. Kwame manages the archive as well as collaborative projects that are concordant with the themes in his father's work, namely activism, politics, fashion, and music. Kwame Samore authored an article entitled A Look at Life Through My Father's Lens for National Geographic. He has lectured at numerous institutions, including Harvard Art Museum, the Courtauld Institute, USC, Christie's, and Google, among others. He co-curated Celebrity and the Everyday at Philip Martin Gallery in 2018. He also curated Black is Beautiful, the photography of Kwame Brathwaite, a touring exhibition in partnership with Aperture Foundation, among many others. Last, joining the panel is Dorothy M. Davis, who's the president of the Griff J. Davis Photographs and Archives, who has unearthed, researched, managed, preserved, and promoted her father's legacy as an internationally renowned pioneer photographer, journalist, and senior U.S. Foreign Service officer. Growing up in an African-American U.S. Foreign Service family, Dorothy Davis unintentionally followed her father's footsteps as a pioneer in the area of international development communications. Born in Liberia and raised in a newly independent Tunisia, the Biafran War, in Nigeria, Switzerland, and the USA, Ms. Davis was shaped by the combined experiences of her parents and her own. Griff Davis passed away in July 1993. Starting as the executor of his estate, Ms. Davis is the primary source and contextual authority on his kaleidoscopic life. It is through Ms. Davis that I was able to bring this exhibition here to the Schomburg Center, reimagine it, and place Langston Hughes at the forefront, as well as his relationships with many other artists and peers, as well as young people who I think also through Davis's letters, we really get to see the reflection of the quality of a relationship many people had with Langston Hughes. Moderating our conversation is Tanya S. Autry, who is a reference specialist in the Schomburg Center's Division of Photographs and Prints. Thank you so much, Tanya, for saying yes, and let's give it up for more Schomburg staff. She is an art historian, educator, curator, and writer who believes in making cultural work a liberatory practice. In addition to co-producing Museums Are Not Neutral, a global movement that disavows propaganda posing museums as outside of history in social production, LaTanya has created exhibitions and programming at institutions such as Yale University Art Gallery and independent projects including Art of Black Descent. She is the author of several essays, including Beholding and Curating with Care, that was appeared in Hyperallergic, and Critical Black Memory as Curatorial Praxis and Collective Care, which was in Critical Memory Studies, New Approaches. LaTanya is completing her PhD in art history at the University of Delaware through examining the interplay of race, representation, memory, and public space in her dissertation, The Crossroads of Commemoration, Lynching Landscapes in America. I think we have the right set of people for us to go through photographic archives and thinking about legacy making and also maintaining legacy. Please now welcome LaTanya Autry, Marilyn Nance, Kwame Brathwaite, and Dorothy Davis. Please join us on stage.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is actually super exciting. I'm so excited to see so many people here and to have this wonderful opportunity to talk to people who do photography and archives. These are like all my favorite things kind of coming together. So, excitement. I thought we could start our conversation thinking about photography and archives and legacy actually by hearing what you all, like how you grew up with photography, what it meant for you kind of growing up. We were talking a little bit off stage about this, but I was thinking each of you probably has really unique stories, but they connect as well. So I don't know who wants to start. Dorothy? You look like you got something.
Well, I was born into photography, let's put it that way. My father took a picture of my mother holding me as an infant that appeared in Ebony magazine, okay, which was a follow-up story to their global honeymoon story that was in Ebony, which is in the exhibition. So from then onwards, he took pictures all the time, and I would try to sabotage the pictures, you know, just because I was tired of it. And then also I now realize that he used us, meaning my brother and me, as subjects to figure out the lighting and the, you know, all the mechanical stuff around photography. So that was my introduction. It was always around, and we always thought of the camera as another member of our family.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd have to echo the same thing. I think it's really interesting when you try to remember back to those moments. I don't think there was ever a time I saw my father without his camera. It was just, it was constant. And you know, he was able to kind of move in and out of situations so that, you know, at first you noticed he was there, and then all of a sudden it was like he disappeared. So it was always a part of it. And people often ask me, you know, he's obviously known for Black is Beautiful. It was just, it was ingrained. It was in our life. It was in our livelihood. It was in the way that we lived. And similar to you, I'm actually not on the cover, but my mother's on the cover of Essence in the year that, actually the month and year that I was born. My father shot the cover. Susan Taylor chose her to be on the cover, and she was pregnant with me. So it's just, you know, it's there. And then my sister, for a really early part of his career, was really the person that he really focused on as a young child. And so she's on covers of, you know, album covers and different things like that. And, you know, my mother and my sister really were his muses. So I think it's really, it was part of it. It was always there, and he never not had as many cameras, actually.
Yeah. And what about you, Marilyn? Because you're a photographer as well, so I'm wondering.
I wonder what my children would say. I grew up regular, like just with a family album. A lot of members in my family had passed away before I was born. So looking at the family album was a way of understanding who was who, and I would ask questions. So the family album became a place for storytelling and finding out about family. I think of myself mainly as a storyteller. I sometimes wonder what made me become a photographer. I have a cousin who says I always wanted to be a photographer. I don't remember that, but she was the person who gave me my first camera, which was a Kodak Instamatic camera. I still have it. I've been thinking, and I think that my photographing is an extension of storytelling. I have a family full of storytellers, and I realize that from going to family reunions. And I think I'm the 20th century version of all of those people that came in front of me. And my children and grandchild will probably be some other iteration of a storyteller.
Oh, I love that. You know, I'm just going to answer it too. So photography for me, I definitely was not on the cover of Ebony ever, or any of these, unfortunately.
I wasn't on the cover of it.
Oh, okay. But you were in there. You were in there. But photography for me, definitely. I think I grew up with all those different little instant cameras. Like I had all those. They had these 110s. The 110 back in the day. But I took it as a regular thing, but I think I would look for pictures of other people, my family, like grandparents and stuff, and I didn't find many. We had a lot of us, of the grandkids, you know, of a certain generation, but I didn't find many of the older people. And my grandmother kind of hated to have her picture taken. So today I just really don't have many of those kind of images. And I want to think about that, like what that means for Black people, like, and having photography. Living in, you know, I know with all of you, there's this connection with kind of really like a global Blackness, so not just like Africa and America, like you grew up in Africa, you know, doing photojournalism work. I know that your father, Kwame, he was very big on the Pan-African kind of scene and taking pictures in Africa. Of course, Marilyn did as well. But I wanted to also think very much like, so we, you know, think about these early pictures and what they mean for us, but what does it mean for us as a Black culture, as Black people, and thinking about these histories of, you know, having history taken away from us. What does the camera mean? What does the photo mean to us?
Well, one of the reasons that I make photographs is it's sort of like a proof of life. I mean, I think very early on I was aware of how Africans in America were seen. And I knew that I saw a different thing, and how was I going to show that? How was I going to tell that? I mean, some of the things we've done have been just so wonderful that maybe if I made a photograph of it and showed it to ourselves, we would then kind of embody what that wonderfulness was. So that's why I make photographs.
Yeah, I think similarly, I think it is in this time when we're dealing with such erasure of culture, the camera is evidence, right? We come from such an oral history and tradition that oftentimes there's stories that are told, and so those have to be corroborated. But if you have a picture, right, and you have the story that behind that picture, that's proof, like you said, proof of life. I think it's proof that we are these amazing people that have done these amazing things, and there's so many different stories. I think that's the thing that's really incredible about the archival process. You continue to discover new things all the time, and so being able to then show that proof and show those connections that oftentimes you miss, right? Because you might not know who's in a picture, but then you might discover later. Those things are proof that, you know, of what we've done, of what we contributed, and continue to tell the story, because ultimately what's gonna have to happen is we're gonna have to tell the story anyway for ourselves. So
what happens when that proof gets buried, though?
Right, right.
You know, we can make the photographs, but then like getting them out is a whole different arena.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, in going through my father's photographs, I mean, he died in 1993, and I knew some things that he had done. He was not open about all things that he had done. And in the process of going through his things, I had very long conversations with him about, why didn't you tell me this? And in going through it, though, I realized that he documented what we would call today as hidden stories. And so because he documented them, they don't need to be hidden anymore. It's like a discovery. And also the time frame when he was doing this. He started photographing at the age of 16, and he was born on Morehouse's campus and raised on Spelman's campus.
Wow.
Because my grandfather was the superintendent of buildings and grounds on Spelman's campus. And so when he learned photography in high school, he became the campus photographer. So in those days, you know, Mary McLeod Bethune, or you know, different people like that would come on campus, and he's taking the picture. So it's been a history lesson for me, and I also realized that he was at a place in time when the independence movement of Africa was just kicking off, and simultaneously U.S. civil rights movement was kicking off. And what I find now is the photographs that he took then, some of those countries don't have those photographs because there was a war, there was a coup, there was a whatever. And so that becomes even more valuable, not only for the collection, but it's valuable for those people who don't know their own history. So, so photography is a form of documenting. He was also a photojournalist, so I also have the written side of this, which is helpful when you're trying to figure out who's who and how it's connected.
No.
Who does all that sorting out, though?
Me. It is me.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to hear you all talk a little bit more, like to describe what is the archive that you're working with, just to give us an idea, like how many things are you dealing with, and when you started working on the archive, and I know it's different because you're the children of photographers growing up with it, but Marilyn, you're doing your own archive, so I want to hear more, like what is this process?
You want to start with? I'll start.
Let's start.
I started calling myself the Marilyn Nance Archive, and people thought, you know, but that's what it is. I mean, it's a way of acknowledging that I have a history. I'm a regular black woman, really, regular black person. And I wanted to serve notice that regular black people can do things, and we have things, and we think things, and we have a legacy. We have an estate. We have, you know, we have genius. We have, you know, intelligence. So, I mean, I've been on this planet for 70 years, and I've been photographing, well, with a 35 millimeter camera for all of my adult life, so since I was about 17 or 18. But I have a cousin who says that, you know, I want to be a photographer, and gave me this camera when I was 8. So in my archive, I have photographs taken by an 8-year-old. So it's really interesting, like, what is an 8-year-old black girl growing up in the 50s, looking at 60s, looking at? What is a black woman in, you know, the mid-century, you know, late, like turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, 21st century, looking at? What is she seeing? What is she doing? And there, you know, there are things that I saw and I witnessed. And so I always thought of myself as creating a kind of a time capsule. So I have many time capsules in my archive. And the time capsule of note now, because there's a book about that, is Last Day in Lagos, which talks about FESTAC 77, which represents exactly 28 days out of my life. So think of all the other things I might have seen, you know. So I'm glad for the 28 days, and I'm happy about the book. But for every photograph that you see, there's so many that you haven't seen. So for the 100 or so images in that book, there's like 1,000 something more. And so for every image that you see, you know, out of Kwame Brathwaite's book, there's so many images that didn't get chosen. So everything you see is something that someone chose for you to see. So how can you represent the greater body of work? That's a question for me, a question for all of us. It's hard.
In one word, yes.
But the other thing, kudos to you, because I think, you know, as you probably noticed, there are times when my father was very good about the organization. There were other times when he was busy, you know, doing what he had to do to, you know, make a living, right? And so it's always, for us, like you said, right, the books, the images, like this image, this is a newer image that we have of, that's out of, you know, Farrakhan and Ali and Michael Alambe at Ali's training camp. But like, there are images that I think we've released maybe between the book and some of the exhibitions, we've probably released about 200 images, maybe 215. And there's, you know, what I've now discovered after joining APAG, probably a lifetime of, you know, research and archiving that's going to happen. And you know, a lot of the people, APAG is, you know, Association of Photographic Archives. It's a group, and we're all a part of it. And we were just talking about how it's really interesting how there's sometimes second and third generation people who are going through this same work. The work of archiving is tedious, and it's an investment.
Archiving yet?
Right, exactly. It's like there's so much. I mean, it's such an investment. But I think the thing that's really important for people who are outside of those archives and people who, you know, may have their own family archives, maybe, you know, you have a person who quilted or someone who told stories or wrote, like, these are really important things that you have to preserve. And so it's really, it's an ongoing process, and it's something that is expensive and time consuming, and it's an investment. But I think we all believe that the importance of it is to be able to share those things with the the greater community for the greater good, because it's really important that people see this work. I think, you know, one of the reasons I started the Kwame Brathwaite Archive as a 501c3 is because, you know, we need to write for grants, and we need to, you know, get awards in order to do this properly and to be able to share it somehow with others. And so it's just important work, and there's just, I think we're probably, you know, 0.01% into it, so.
Well, okay, I started this 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I thought it was going to be 2 years. My dad, in his last 3 or 4 months, he died of prostate cancer, so he knew he was dying. And so some friends of his in Atlanta decided to put an exhibition together of his work. Now, up to now, I saw photographs. I mean, when he retired, he would put up photographs on the wall in the house, and I thought, oh, Dad's going back to having a hobby. You know, and I'm just, oh, good, he's occupied, right? Okay, so at this exhibition, the curator, who was a family friend, came up to me and looked straight in the eye and said, you're going to take care of his photographs. I'm like, well, I got to take care of everything else. I don't know why you're singling this out, but I wasn't rude. I didn't say that, right? But anyway, so he dies, and I start going through this house. Right? And so I thought it would just be packing up and doing something, right? So I said, you know what, maybe I should just see what's in this little package. Right? And I looked, and there was a personal letter from Kwame Nkrumah to my dad. Okay? Wow. And I'm like, oh, okay. Then I had to leave the house, regroup, and realize, oh no, I really have to go through all of this, and if I don't do it now, I will never do it.
Right.
So that's what I started doing, and I just kept going through, and I also knew he had his own system, which was unique to how he thought, and of course, being his daughter, I know how he thought. Right. So I would just take each, I call them, they were like manila envelopes, right? And it might have 1 or 2 words on the outside of the envelope to kind of give you some context, but not a whole lot. And then you go inside the envelope, and then you start seeing what the meat of it is, right? So that's how it started. And mind you, I had a 3-year-old daughter, I had a full-time job, and it was in Atlanta, and I was living in New York, so I was like going back and forth. It took 2 years just to get it organized.
Right.
And since then, it's just, you know, sometimes I put it down, and then other times I go down a rabbit hole, as they would say, on a certain part of it, and research it, and then I find out these nuggets. And that's how I got to the Langston Hughes discovery, I'll put it that way.
One nugget, right?
Just one nugget, just one nugget, yeah. Yeah.
Can we talk about what preserve means?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great question. Let's do it.
Okay. First thing, keep the archive safe, meaning don't put it in the attic because you wouldn't want to live there. Don't put it in the basement because you wouldn't want to live there. Keep it away from water, bugs, rodents, all that kind of stuff. Put it in the best box you can find. I started in plastic cases, then I graduated. So, you know, make a system, make it a modular system so that you can add on to it in a way that it looks like a system and it doesn't look like a shopping bag here and a box over there. So be systematic. After you keep it safe, even if it's not organized, keep it safe because maybe somebody else can organize it, but while you have time, organize it, meaning break it down, or if it's a lot of nuggets, maybe choose one nugget that you're going to really work. And so for me, it was like, let me do this FESTAC thing because it involves hundreds of artists. So I wanted to do something that benefited other people as well. And then after you keep it safe and you organize it, then you have to make it accessible. Right. How do you get other people to see your nuggets? Right. You know, where are you going to put your nuggets? Are you going to have it online? Or do you have a facility for people to walk into? Are you going to donate your nuggets to an archive? Which facility, who wants your nuggets, you know? So, and also, your nuggets are worth a lot of money. How are you going to get paid for because all of the work that you've done is an investment. Those boxes cost money, those file cabinets cost money, that air conditioning costs money. Housing costs money. You can't even have an archive if you don't have safe housing. Right. So if you're moving from place to place and your housing situation isn't good, your archive is not going to be good. So when you talk about archives, you really have to talk about affordable housing. You have to talk about good health care. You have to have all of that personal stuff together in your community. In order to keep the archive safe, you have to keep yourself safe.
Marilyn, you've thought about this a little bit. Just a little. You have that.
Preach, on this, because you got to do. Somebody's got to say it.
It's true. It's true. It's you know, I had the fortune of, you know, at the beginning of doing this work, which was about 10 years ago. I have 3 children, and my middle son was on the playground with one of his friends at school, and I ended up talking to the dad, and he happened to be a gallery owner. And so when we started talking about the work that we were doing, and after my mother finally convinced my father to allow me to work with the negatives, that took a year, exactly. He was able to take us into the Getty archives. So I got to see, like, okay, this is what you this is what you want. This is the you know
gold
the gold standard. It's the you know the light at the end of the tunnel, but you have to get to that, right? They have funds and donations and donors and all those things. So, you know, like you said, you have to develop a system, and based on that system, start building off of that. And like for us, you did FESTAC. The thing for us, it was like, okay, one of the things that happened when we first started was, you know, I started asking kind of, you know, well-known historians, like, do you understand where the Black is Beautiful movement was born? Through Ajaz and the Grandassa models. Like, do you know that? And people were like, oh, we didn't know that. And so I said, okay, now we have to tell you know, in, you know, Marvel, the origin story, right? So you got to tell the beginning of what happened, how these young people, again, like you said, 18, 19 years old, these group of young men who decided, okay, we're going to do something and educate people around Pan-Africanism and who they are, and, you know, make a connection back to Africa. And this is the thing that I thought was really amazing about this as well. It's AJAZ, they called themselves AJAZ, African Jazz Art Society, at the beginning. They're calling themselves African in 1956, when no one was thinking about that connection to Africa. And then later on, they formed the Grandassa Models in 1962. So it's just this, and this group of women who are educators, who are women in the community who embrace their creators. And it was a group of creators that came together both in AJAZ and the Grandassa Models, who then create the movement that we know today. So it's just, for us, it was like, let's tell this story, and how can we tell that story? And we're telling it through pictures, we're telling it through ephemera, we're telling it through obviously the organizations, the Kwame Brathwaite Archive, the Kwame Brathwaite Foundation, and others. And so we're establishing for people what it is. But the funny thing is now people just want to see portrait. You know, they just want to see these beautiful portraits, and it's so much deeper than that. So, you know, you have to kind of steer them. So now we're going in a different direction and really kind of focusing in on what's there.
Well, I know there was a period of time where I was calling myself a photojournalist, and if I was shooting here, Kwame would be over there. So for whatever else you find in Kwame's, in your dad's archive, you'll find other photographers who are like right there. So when you get to that, if you have, you know, make a list.
Yeah.
I made a list of I have another 7 books. And
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Make a list.
And the collaborations, right? You know, these, you know, there are all these opportunities. There's so many other stories that are not being told, right?
There's a lot of stories that are not
you know,
being told. People
knew, you know, Gordon, they knew Roy. And so it's like there's a whole
system, I don't know.
Of so many photographers that, you know, developed what we have today. And then there's the younger people who are coming up, and they need to understand that connection. Like we were talking about, right? That the connection to the older photographers, and being able to reference that as, you know, information, as, you know, a source of kind of understanding. And oftentimes those photographers are connected.
Yeah.
They don't realize it, but they are.
Gordon Parks and my dad were photographers at Ebony, and also with Life.
Right.
Because, okay, so my dad was the first roving editor for Ebony at the recommendation of Langston Hughes. And then after 18 months, he wanted to hone his skills. So he wanted to apply to Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and there was correspondence between him and Langston Hughes as to whether that was a good idea, not a good idea, whatever. Anyway, he ended up applying, and Langston wrote his recommendation letter. And I know the story's like crazy, and this is what is so crazy about going through the archives, because I knew nothing about that, right? And so I'm piecing, it's like, I call it Hansel and Gretel. I'm piecing pieces together, like, oh, that goes with this, and this goes with that.
Right.
And so, so when he got to Columbia, Langston Hughes offered for him to rent a room in his house, okay? So now he's in the house, and while he was at Columbia, he took a side course at New School with this man named Kurt Safransky, who was one of 3 Jewish emigres from Germany who came and brought the photojournalism industry to the US, okay? And that man, Kurt, this is what I'm saying, this is the story, right? And I'm not making it up, honestly. And so Kurt Safransky is the one who helped Henry Luce create Life magazine, okay? So it just goes on. And so after Dad graduated in 49, class of 49, he was the only black person in his class.
School of Journalism?
In School of Journalism, which I constantly remind them of that. He became the only international freelance photojournalist for them, for Black Star Publishing, because those 3 emigres created a company called Black Star Publishing Company. And what they would do is, well, so Dad wanted to go to Africa. He wanted to go to Liberia. He was excited about the independence movement and wanted to be there and all that. So he went to Liberia as a freelance photojournalist, and he would send stories back to Black Star, and they would publish them or place them. So his stories got into Life magazine, Time magazine, Der Spiegel, Saturday Evening Post. None of you guys would know Saturday Evening Post, but anyway, it was a magazine. You know, so he was operating in an environment that was really, what do you call it, solo in terms of Black people.
Right.
But there were others that were in there, but not a whole lot. And then because there's no internet, there's no, you know, communication like that, people don't necessarily know what he's doing over there. And in some cases, they didn't give him the credit, so you don't know that either. But in his documentation, and maybe that's why he documented it all, to be sure, okay, I want you to know I was here. I mean, one thing he really said to me, if there's any lesson of photography he told me about, is be sure you have yourself in the photograph. Be sure you include yourself in the photograph. You can take photographs of all these other people, but be sure you are in it. And so you will see him in his own photographs, which he has staged. It's the beginning of selfie, right?
Right.
Staged.
Right.
And that's the reason. Like, I was here. You know, nobody can take that away from me.
You know, that's a good point, because people look at my photographs and they say, "You took that? You took that?" You know, it's like disbelief, you know?
Exactly. And I think that's also part of it.
That picture, right?
Right.
That's also part of the story, is that we have been conditioned as Black people, no matter where we are in the world, we've been conditioned to think we can only be this. And part of my mantra, we want to call it, is we can be all these things, and nobody should stop you.
Right.
And if they can do it in that era, we can do it in this era and beyond. And so that to me is really, yeah, that's my little political statement.
There you go.
Well, I love that. And you know, what's exciting to me is, like, you know, when I was reading the book and reading just like an article that came out in New York Times about your dad back in 2021, what I love is just seeing, so here are these very young people who, they had a political education, they grew up with that, their parents were Garveyites, I'm not sure, maybe, I don't know, that might be, maybe they weren't Garveyites, but
they were.
They were, okay. Because I feel like they were very, the parents were very inspired by Garvey, and it looked like that your dad was, you know, very much interested in what was going on in terms of Black nationalism and Africa, Pan-African. And what I think is so exciting is to see, so these are very young people who are just make things happen. They start organizations, and what I would love to see more today, personally, is for more people not to feel like, oh, if this thing doesn't fit for me, I have to keep trying to fit in it or make them want me or like me or respect me. There were people who were just like, let's make this happen. Let's do our own thing over here. And I feel like that in each of the projects that you all do, there's that moment. And I feel like by the archival work you're doing is bringing, to me, some of that back. Like, when we can read about it, we see it, it's very inspiring. I don't know, I feel like it's part of the legacy work as well. Yeah. Legacy.
Yeah.
Legacy.
Did you? Well, we're going to do questions a little later, but so. Oh, well, hold your story for a little bit. I wanted to ask you, Kwame, did you know you were going to take on this archival project? Like, before it happened, did you know, was there a conversation with your dad about, like, this is what, and you were like, yes, I want to do this?
No, so, I mean, there was a moment, and I've talked about this before, there's a moment when my mother and my father were visiting us in California, and my father had a manila envelope with him. And in the manila envelope was a picture of, it was the Righteous Brothers David Bowie, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and Roberta Flack backstage at the Grammys. It was this beautiful black and white picture, and I was like, wow, that's really incredible. And then the next picture behind it was an image of Muhammad Ali sitting on a bench right before the rumble in the jungle, and he called it Great Day on the Congo. And I was like, oh my gosh, these images are amazing. Like, why have I never seen these before? And he goes, I got plenty of images you've never seen before.
Right.
And so, you know, it was the first time when, you know, I looked at my wife, Robin, and my mom, and we were like, oh, we have to do something about this. So, but admittedly, even back then, even when we first started the project, it was really I wanted people to understand his contribution and the groups that he was a part of, those contributions, what they were doing, what they did for us as a people, and what they did for society. So I just wanted that. So what I was always doing was trying to kind of promote him, and then as his health started to deteriorate, it started to dawn on me, and I was actually talking to a mentor, this woman who, her name is Susan Chapman. She, I work in real estate, so she was someone who like I was working with, and she was a mentor, and I interviewed her for a project when I was in business school, and she said, you have to come to terms with the fact that this may be your path. And so that's what, it was like the gut punch, it was a aha moment that Oprah always talks about, and I was like, oh wow. I never really thought, I was always trying to make sure that it was about him, and still to this day, but I've had to step in, and I jokingly say I'm like Lady Eloise. So it's like, I'm there, I'm you know, representing his work, but he did all the work, right? What I'm doing now is just making sure that people get to experience it in many different ways and trying to do it in a contemporary way. But it's been a realization that has been slow. I can say that.
Process.
Well, I have
Yes.
a question for you. Sorry.
No, go for it.
In doing this, okay, so you inherited it too, in a
Right.
sense, right?
Right.
And so, in the process of finding new things about your dad and his photographs, what do you learn? What does that do in terms of your understanding of your life?
Oh wow. You know, I think the thing that's really been kind of revealed, and I think photography, photojournalism, all of it's all revelation, like you're always revealing things. I think the thing that's been revealed to me is that the passion that he had for his craft was not about necessarily him, but about us.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I've realized is that I'm doing this not for me and for him, I'm doing it for us, because what ultimately is the goal is that people get to experience this. People get to understand this. You know, there are people who wear their hair natural now who don't understand necessarily where that came from and why. And so I want people to understand that lineage. I want people to understand and be proud of like what that is, and you know, and to experience it. And so for me, it is constantly about this is more than me. It's more than like him. It's about what they did and he did to create this space for us to love ourselves. So for me, I feel like what's been revealed is that this is much greater than just us.
I think that's a great question to ask you, Marilyn. What are you learning about yourself, or now that you're doing your archive of your own work?
Well, I did learn that I was part of a whole tradition of storytellers. What am I learning about myself? Well, I have children, and I'm trying to get them involved in.
Oh, you're doing recruiting right now.
I'm recruiting. I'm recruiting the grandchild also, because I'm seeing that grandchildren. We're members of the American Photography Archives group, which we all found out this evening, but their nieces and nephews that administer, that take care of their relatives' archives, their grandchildren. Very rarely are there children that do that. But I mean, my daughter is more involved with my archiving because I just don't like scanning and things, and so I involve her in that, and it means that she's got to know where the negatives are. She knows the organization of them. She's got keys to the studio. I trust her, and at some point the archive, when people license the work, that means income comes in, and that means that there's income that I can, there are funds that I can distribute to people that work with me. Right. So I try to involve, the young folks. I like to brag that I have an army. I don't have an army, but everybody, for me, sometimes working in an archive, working with my own stuff, it's like a pleasure, pain. It's like it's hard. Yeah. But when you're working with someone younger, they're like, whoa, that's so and so, and there's this excitement. Right. So and younger folks have I'm good with technology, but younger folks are faster and have a grasp of technology, and so I think that I try to involve others in learning about not so much me, but the era that I came out of. So what am I learning about myself? I don't know.
That's a lot in itself, right? I think so. I think, what all of you are saying in some ways that the archive and working on it is really kind of a collaborative project, whether you can't do it alone. Yeah, you can't do it alone. Have you been doing this alone?
No, I've been doing it alone.
Okay.
No, I've been doing it alone. I have these guardian angels that pop up every once in a while, and they've been great. They've been with me for at least 20 years, some of them. And then, I feel like I'm being guided. That's the only way I can put it. I do remember when my dad died, I said, okay, you work on that side, and I'll work on this side. And I think that's what's happening, right, because these doors open up out of nowhere, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're going down that path now. Okay, so I've been leveraging his life, his network, my life, my network, and I've been focused on making sure that the work is not, and the legacy is seen as an American legacy or a global legacy. Right. I'm very focused on it's an American legacy and it's a global legacy. So for that, I purposely, like if there's a photograph, there's a photograph of the founders, the co-founders, where there were a couple, so co-founders of Jazz Magazine in France. And one of the first things I did when he died was put up a website, because I used that as a lighthouse. Because I said, okay, his stuff is all over the place. At least there's a place that people can come to. So anyway, out of the blue, I get this email from Jazz Magazine in France saying, we have this image from your dad, and we want to put it in this exhibition. And all of a sudden, he's in an exhibition in France. And so that's part of me trying to make sure people see we are global. Right. We are American, we are African American, all those different categories we are. And that's it.
That's wonderful. That's it. So I wanted to talk about, and each of you have touched on this in some way, but to think about the technological aspects of working with the archive, and some of it is definitely analog, because it's literally dealing with the folders like you talked about, and trying to organize things, but also these various digital technologies. And I know, Kwame, you have that great social media on IG. You keep that page up. It's really beautiful and wonderful. Marilyn, I know you've talked about someone, I think it was Rudy Roy, and suggested you go on IG, and you tried that out for a while. I just want to hear what are the things that have been exciting, great? What are some of the challenges you've been finding with these various technologies?
Okay, I'll start. I come from the ancient internet, which is like 1994, 95, and I started a website. I had a website then before people were on Facebook because I wanted to, that was my way of archiving online or putting some things there so that when people went looking, they could find something there. And so that website has been online consistently from 1995 up until 2024. So for those folks who weren't ready for that information in 1995, there's a whole new crop of people, and they're discovering the things that I put up. So I guess embracing the internet was the first technology beyond, photographic technology. And up to now, I think once I realized that I wanted to sort of advance the story of FESTAC 77, I went crowdsourcing on Facebook because I was trying, do you know who this is? You know who this is? Of course, people didn't know because these were older folks, but I did get some information. And when I got closer to creating the book, that's when I was working with Instagram, and at that point, it was just like I found that I had to create another Instagram page, which was FESTAC 77 Archive, and that page was geared mainly towards folks in Africa. Like, who in Africa knows about who are these people? Who are the, So on Instagram, I have like 3 separate accounts. One which was the original one that I started after Radcliffe Roy edged me on, and the second one, which was Marilyn.Nance, which is the Marilyn Nance Archive, which just talks about my photographs and things, and then FESTAC 77 Archive, which just deals with, the FESTAC, really. And I guess if I decide on doing something else, I'd have another output. But also, I'm ready for all of those systems to really crash and burn. So when that happens, I still have the negatives, I still have paper, I still have pen and pencil, because I don't own any of those systems other than my own websites, which I think I can maintain. But those social networks, which I don't pay for, are benefiting from our content. And if they decide to remove that network, then that's it. I still have me, though.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. Technology is not my friend. Oh, well, it is my friend, but I'm not good at it. But I know who to go to who is good at it. So that's where I bring in my guardian angels, and I say, how do you do this? This is what I want to do. How do you do it? This exhibition here has made me learn a whole lot about social media on my own, and it's stretched me in terms of using it, trying to get the word out and all of that. But I've learned about metadata to be sure that the images, it's embedded, the information, the copyright, all that is embedded in the image. I've learned about that, but I can't do that. Somebody else does that. I've learned about, well, I'm learning about AI. That is a whole nother can of worms. But I just find that I take one step and then I think it's easy, and then I find I have to learn a whole nother. It's like taking one exam and realizing you have to study for the whole semester or something like that. It's a lot. It's a lot to do.
Yeah, I think for me, I've obviously really embraced Instagram. I feel like from a, showing photographs, it's a really great platform, right? But like you said, you don't have ownership of it. The other thing about AI, you have to be careful. Like you put images in AI, and then the fine print of AI, they own those images and they can do what they want of it. And all of a sudden that image is talking, right? It's a video. So you have to be careful with that. But for me, we've had the fortune of, I post just enough to keep people interested. but not enough, because I don't think people, would go to me that much, right? It's Instagram is very much based off of people needing, endorphins, whatever. But I think the thing that has been beneficial for us is that we've had some collaborations, we've had some, similar to like what Ajaz and the Grandassa models did back in the 60s. They had Max and Abby, they had Miles Davis, they had these people who were out, they were, the influencers of that time, out in the world kind of talking about the work. Jesse Williams was one of the first people who really kind of embraced the work. So, he had Grey's Anatomy contact us to put the image of my mother, the book cover, on the show. They thought it was too expensive. I said, why don't we license it? And it was on the show for like 5 years. And then, when Rihanna dropped her Fenty clothing line, she then referenced some of the images from the archive and then talked about it for a yen, right? And so it was one of those things where you had, and now, at the Brooklyn Museum right now, as part of Giants, Alicia Keys and Swiss Beach collection, they have become collectors as well. So what's happened is that there have been people who have been able to talk about it, and they've brought their network to our work. So, since Giants opened now, I have other people reaching out and saying, oh, I didn't realize that this was something that was available. So you get that, but I think for the most part, I think you have to stay up on the technology. I have the benefit of having 3 children, almost all 3 teenagers. My youngest is 12. My oldest, who's now picked up a camera, he's into this stuff. So I'm learning from him, right? So I'm like, okay, Jackson, tell me more about like what you think we should be doing. And so, we might dabble in some AR or whatever it is, but I think it's really, one of the things that I think is important, and I've always, and it's part of like even my bio, is like, I'm trying to find ways to engage people currently. So, I'm working with these jazz musicians who are creating original content based off the images, and so there's an album that we're working on. So I'm trying to engage people in ways in which they want to engage, and using technology in that way, because I think it's critical. I mean, the success of these archives across the board are based off of the up and coming, the young people, right? It's the young curators, it's the young museum goer, it's the young historian who wants to then go and find these images and come to the Schomburg and do the research and get into these images and get into these, works to then say, oh, this is inspiring me. And I've had so many young people come up and like, I came to your talk and it made me want to be a curator. So like, those are the things that continue to build our network and continue to build what we're going to need in the future to continue to tell these stories.
That's lovely, yes.
Let me talk about the non-sexy part of technology, spreadsheeting, Google Docs. Technology enables us to share a photograph from here to Paris, like in a couple of seconds, and that's really important. We can move an image. It's, even in doing this, I mean, there was, it enabled us to like share word of this talk on our various social networks. Right. But, Tanya had a Google Doc, which we could respond to. And, those things, like I know that in terms of technology, I could like pick up my mobile device. I can't even call it a phone anymore. Pick up my mobile device and I can locate like all of the, like if someone said like, do you have a picture of Aretha Franklin? I could look that up and find out if I had a contact sheet that had the Aretha Franklin in the name. I'd like to get to the point where I could find out if I have an image of Aretha Franklin. I'm not there yet, but I have a list of every contact sheet that I've created, and every I have a list of I have a list of every FESTAC 77 image all the images that I've made. But that's what I did was create like a small set that would stand, would be sort of be a prototype for what else could be done. But to build it out would just take a whole lot more years and people and all of that. But at least as a prototype, so when I'm gone, someone could say, oh, I see she did it this way, and maybe that's the way the rest of it should go. But yeah, there's a whole lot of, I used to be I studied technology, so I'm not unfamiliar with it. I'm not afraid of it, but I like to use it, and I also recognize how sometimes it uses us.
Yeah. I just wanted to add something. Cataloging is like essential, so you can find things and you can go back to them, and you leave some kind of trace of your steps, the steps that you've made. Right. My dad left 50. This is according to him, because I don't know, but he left 55,000 images, and they are in slides, negatives, contact sheets, film, and prints. I think I covered everything. And I
digital files.
No, he didn't have.
But you created some.
I've created some digital files, but then we get to funding.
Right.
And funding, I haven't been really successful at getting the amount of money that I really need to do it effectively. So it's basically been me paying for whatever needs to happen at any given time. Right. And I'm really trying to figure that piece out, because I feel like the Langston Hughes exhibition, there are maybe 12 other exhibitions that I could have, meaning subject matter, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Right. And I'm trying to get to the iceberg so I can see what else is in there, because you get tired of being surprised. Like, oh my God, look at this. There was a picture of a Nigerian named Ben Nwanwu, who was who now I find out, because I learn all the time, he's like the Picasso or something of Africa, right? Now. And I got a call from his foundation who saw my dad's name on the website, this lighthouse thing. And they said, do you know Ben Nwanwu? I said, well, no. But I do have this painting up here on the wall that has been in Nwanwu, right? And I just, okay, that's Dad's painting or my aunt's painting or somebody's painting, right? That's it. I didn't know anything else. And then they said, well, you do know that he's the Picasso of Africa. I'm like, no, no. And so that started a whole nother relationship. So then basically they said, well, if you want to sell it, we can give it to Sotheby's. And so that's like a whole nother market, right? Yeah. And so anyway, as we progressed, one day I stumbled on a photograph of Ben Nwanwu that my dad had taken of him standing in front of that, oh God, at Rockefeller Center, where the man is holding the thing up, I forget.
Oh, Atlas, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anyway, he's standing in front of that, right? And so I said, oh, by the way, I found this photo, and I'm just saying it like that. And the guy says, are you kidding me? I'm like, whoa, what happened? He says, well, we're about to have an auction of a statue or something that he made, his version of that. Wow. So that meant that was his inspiration, right? I'm like, Lord have mercy. So I'm like, okay. So they said, can we put this photograph in the auction book? Sure, but that's a whole nother market for me, right? So this is how my life has been going, right? In terms of these doors that open out of nowhere, and I'm discovering things.
All these connections.
And the other part about it is that you don't necessarily know how to then make that work for you.
Exactly.
Right. So there's that part of it too.
Oh my God, this has been such a rich conversation, you all. I feel like we could talk more. I want to hear actually like more thoughts on all of these, and that story you just shared is amazing. But we also want to have a little bit of time for some questions, and we invite people to, I think there's supposed to be mics in the back. I don't know where they are exactly because the lights are on my face right now, but I think on either side there are some mics. And we invite you to come up to the mic and share your thoughts.
Oh, they're getting up.
Got some questions?
Ooh.
Hello there, my name is Rebecca, and I'm really curious because I know how expensive archiving is. If you couldn't do that. Thank you. I just wanted to know, what were the methods of actually paying for it? Because I know that even archival boxes are $50 a box, and if you have tons of photographs, it's really expensive also with how film degrades, how you're going about the process of transferring that data into other mediums without losing the quality of the data.
Film doesn't degrade as quickly as digital matter. So, but as far as the boxes and paying for them?
No, I'm saying how you pay to archive it. Like, how are you finding funding? How are you finding the funding to pay for long-term archiving for your collections?
Well, I pay for a lot of stuff myself, but what I do is I license the images, and so I charge for the use of the images in different venues. If a film wants to use the photographs, there's a fee. If there's, a publication wants to use a photograph, there's a fee.
So essentially you use this profit to sort of further keep the life of your archive going.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So essentially you use the fees that you charge for your archive to keep your archive going.
Yeah. And then there might be some grants or awards or things like that. Basically, it's self-funded.
And does any of the other people on the panel care to speak about that?
Yeah, I mean, similarly here, I think oftentimes, people looking from the outside are like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, like you're making all this money. The money goes right back into
you look at money spent.
Right, yeah, exactly. You're right. So you're making money to then further get deeper into the archive. So it is one of those things where, like I said before, I created a 501c3 because I want to be able to write for grants, because self-funding, as I said, I have 3 children, one's ready to go to college. Like, it is something that, you're constantly bringing it back. So it's like any entrepreneurial activity. Oftentimes you find the work that you're putting in builds to something, and hopefully, something gets later on. But I think licensing, I was talking to someone not too long ago from APAG who essentially said their 3rd generation, they still haven't finished archiving the work, and they make their money off of the licensing fees that they get. They just so happen to have Marilyn Monroe, a bunch of pictures of Marilyn Monroe, so they have a very strong licensing play and work with a company. But it is, generally that's what you do. You try to figure out ways in which you can kind of help fund the work that you're doing to continue to archive.
I just want to add, I think it's harder with Black photographers because you have to always constantly show that there's value. And then when you show value, it's underestimated.
Yeah. Oh, that's the picture, right?
Yeah, that's the picture.
Have any of you figured out what your long-term contingency plans are for your archives? Like, not just today, but in 100 years, where do you see your archives, and what's your plan for that?
100 years.
Your question.
Live long. Work with young people. Pass it on.
Go ahead.
My father always envisioned this would be something that his grandchildren would be working with. So that's at least the 40, 50-year plan.
I don't know about 100, right?
My daughter has said she's not interested. So I have to figure out where to.
She'll change.
That's what I say, because I wasn't interested, and here I am. But I'm trying to find a place to put it and to monetize it, and then I have other thoughts like a feature film and Netflix and things like that.
Institutions, right? Like what we're in, right?
Right.
Yeah. Before we go to the next question, I did want to ask Tanya, sort of where do institutions, where do we come in inside of that process for folks who are managing their archives, but maybe they already know that there isn't a family member that is going to manage it. There isn't someone who's really going to take it on. How do institutions like the Schomburg Center or the library or other places that you know of, how can they be supportive in that work, and like what's that kind of relationship in a snippet?
Right, yeah, like in 10 seconds. It's definitely challenging because this is an issue that comes up for like all of us, really. You know, we're people. Nobody lives forever, and families do call us and tell us about things that they have, and they want to know. Like a lot of times, they want to feel good that they made an effort, but they want to get rid of the stuff quickly. It's not a quick process, and as all of you have been talking, and not everybody does want to get that involved in it. A lot of times they want to move on because they have other things going on in their life. You know, we do try to tell people it's important to try to do an inventory of what you have, and it is stages about like how involved you're going to get with something, and about, as you said, it does cost money to save things. But I do like what you started with in the opening. Start with where you are, even if it's not like the fancy archival box. Use whatever box you got. Start with that, and then if you do stick with it, or other people in your family do, if they inherit this project, they can upgrade to a higher quality box or whatever. But yeah, the conversation is very much about like, what is it that you have, knowing what it is, knowing if it even makes sense with this particular institution versus another one. Sometimes somebody will start talking and they're just like, it's just Black culture, but it's really something they have a particular set of things that are related to a history of a certain neighborhood or something like that. And I go, have you tried talking to this historical society? Right. So trying to find exactly where something might fit. And it's a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, but yes, it is a thing that comes up. We do have like some materials, I think, on our website about helping people identify people in photographs, because a lot of times the research is about trying to figure that kind of thing out before deciding what to do with it. So yeah, it's a big project. I don't want to take up too much time, but it's a good question.
Like Kwame said, visit other archives also to see what's, what it looks like to create something.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. Oh, great. Yeah, my name is Kirk Boone. I'm a street photographer, and I spent a lot of time publishing like my own books as a vehicle to getting material out, because a lot of African Americans have difficulty in publishing books. So I'd like the panelists to maybe talk a little bit about their publishing experience and whether independent publishing could be an option. I know a lot of archives do independent publishing, and you can do limited edition books. You can do a lot of different things in the publishing realm. So I was just interested, are you guys looking at that possibility outside of licensing, producing books on your own in that vein?
Yeah, we went through Aperture Foundation to do our particular book. My father wanted to self-publish. I wanted his book to reach more people, because the goal was for the knowledge base to be expanded upon. So we particularly use Aperture. It was a really good experience. Photography books are books in general. I have a friend who's he just wrote the Martin Luther King book. He's had 4 New York Times bestsellers. He's like, this is not a profitable business. Even when you're writing on that level. But however, if you want people to experience the book, I think you find ways, right? And we've chosen Aperture. I'm now on the board of Aperture, so I'm it's one of the things that they do. They look for new photographers, new things that they want to put out, because it's a photography organization. But we've thought of self-publishing to go for another book, right? But other publishers will come. It's not the most profitable business, but it's a way for you to get your message out. And I feel like for me, having this book be in its 5th printing, it's now going on its 6th, after being released in 2019, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to achieve it being out into the public so people could see it. But I think self-publishing is a great way, especially if you want to have control over what's the content and what's happening. We had great control at Aperture because it's an art organization, so they wanted the truth, and that was one of the things my father was very adamant about. But being able to self-publish is one of the more powerful ways to make sure that your book is out. You may not reach as many people unless you figure out a way to get viral, but it's definitely a way to control what you're doing.
I'll talk. Go ahead. I just want to say.
While you're talking also on, you have a lot of photos, but obviously Aperture published, you selected them. I don't want to lose the conversation, but in terms of that archive of photos not being used, is that a thought? Because commercial publishers not going to take all your work.
Right.
So just as a tool.
Right.
But I don't want to stop the conversation, but I definitely want to get some feedback.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to go through that curation, right? There's a curation that's going to happen, right? There's a book they have a budget. There's a book that's going to be a certain length, so that's going to take place. But
okay.
Thank you. I got a question. Greetings. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry. We actually do need to have you on mic because we also have people listening on the live stream, and it's an accessibility. So we'll take this question back here, but if a volunteer could bring him a mic, that is fine. But in the meantime, we'll take your question.
Yes, I heard y'all talk so much about being inspired by the pictures you're seeing and learning something new. Could y'all just talk about photography maybe being a healing tool for people to be humanized? And if it can be used as a healing tool to humanize, can it also be used as a propaganda tool to colonize? There you go. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I have a good one for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a good one for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with the propaganda side and colonized side. So there's a photograph, it may be in this cycle, of the first meeting between then Vice President Richard Nixon and Martin Luther King Jr. and their respective wives in Ghana. There it is. Okay. In Ghana, on Ghana's Independence Day in 1957. Okay, that's the photo. All right, so my dad was one of 20 accredited photographers for that event. He was a Foreign Service officer, and he was assigned to be the photographer for Nixon and U.S. delegation. Well, this photo was taken 3 months after the Montgomery bus boycott ended, and the U.S. banned it from being shown in the U.S. For decades. Okay, so that's the propaganda side. Healing, I'll say that there was an Ethiopian friend of mine who saw different photos that my dad did, and one of the words he used was that my dad shot people or photographed people showing their dignity, and that was very healing for him because we are not seen that way a lot of times.
Yeah. And many photographs we may have grown up with, and not grown up with, but we see to this day, to this current day, are propaganda because the people who own the media decide what photographs get shown, and that's why you didn't see Kwame Brathwaite's photographs widely during his lifetime, or you didn't see the FESTAC photographs. So there's certain things that are suppressed because for different reasons, because the people who own the media get to control the media.
Right.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I agree 100% on both comments. You know, one of the things that happened during the pandemic, and I got this a lot through Instagram, was that people were going, after seeing all those images of, you know, us being brutalized and all the things that were happening, people were going to the book as a way to kind of like heal and experience respite. And I've actually had people say that to me after going to exhibitions and being in front of the work and just having visceral responses to it, right? Either breaking down and crying or just from joy or from, you know, I had one woman who had gone through the whole thought process of like, okay, do I straighten, do I keep it natural? And she like just had this, she just broke down because she was like, I feel like I made the wrong decision. And it wasn't about what's wrong or right, it was just being able to have that option, right? We didn't have that option before these groups came along and talked about this stuff. So it's really, I find it really uplifting, and the work is really uplifting, and people always are like, oh, how do you do this and do something else? I'm like, you know, you have your day job, and then you have the work that this is, and you have conversations like this that build community and this community that we're building together. So it's been very healing for me personally too.
Yeah. I just want to say that I made a big deal out of having a book that was like sized so that you could hold it in your hand, because just holding the book, you know, I felt would be something of a healing. There'd be something just like, it's like from the old days, like put your hand on the Bible or put your hand on the radio, you know, you just touch it and you get something. But I think there's something to be said about tangible things, you know, things that you can hold in your hand. We've become so screen-based, and as we said, you know, if you buy a book, then that's your book. But if you like just have an ebook, that's their book. So, you know, buy a book.
So we are going to take the rest of these questions. I am going to ask that you keep your questions brief, and also please direct it to maybe one panelist so that we can get to all of them. Sir.
For a couple of them.
Well, we're going to ask you to direct it to one of them. Thank you.
I can't do that.
Okay.
It's a question. It's a question about your work and how you produce it. And now that the things are the way they are in today's world, for example, I have been told that I need to sign and number all my prints because I'm getting old and I'm going to be gone. Mm-hmm. And they're not worth anything if they're not signed and numbered. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
I've been told that too, but I don't. All of my images have a file number, so they don't have a. It's not a series. It's not an edition.
Not a file number. You just sign them.
I have a couple of boxes that say. I don't have editions. I mean, I have had some.
Yeah.
You do what you can.
Yeah. Look, I think, so in my experience, when you're dealing with, I've had collectors say, oh, it's not signed by the artist, and it's not, we number ours and we have them editioned, but it's not signed by the artist. Oh, I don't want it. Okay, that's cool. That's your choice. And there's some people who are the purists, right? Who only buy gels and silver or do whatever. You're going to experience that. There is an intrinsic value on you, the artist, having your notes. Even if you made a note on it creates additional value. So I would say, to kind of follow that advice, you don't necessarily have to put. Say it again? On the print. On the print. I've had people, you know, reach out to me via Instagram or do the website and say, oh, I found, I have one of your father's prints and it was behind something else. Mm-hmm. But I know it was his because the signature, and I'm like, send me the signature, and it's his signature. I was like, okay, you have one of the authentic older prints that he had made. And so there's more value. I don't know, there's no like multiplier per se. Right, but I think that's legitimate. There is value in it.
Start tomorrow.
We're going to go to the next question.
So thank y'all so much. I am a photographer from White Plains, New York, and I've been working on taking photos of my city because there are no Black people in our city's archives. I've been working with Tanya. And as I've been doing this work, people across the city, a lot of older folk, have kind of been willing to give me their photos, but also their videos. Yeah. And I don't have any experience in that space, and I want to make sure that I'm taking care of people's work and preserving their work. And I just want to figure out where to start. And any one of y'all can answer that.
What volume?
Yeah.
I mean, do you have enough space?
Working on that. That's another reason I don't want to take their stuff just yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Dorothy, if you could offer one piece of advice for her, what would you say?
Try to organize it in some kind of meaningful way, like maybe according to dates. Like recently I had to organize what I call drugstore photographs, and what I finally decided to do was go by the addresses. So all the drugstore photographs that were part of a certain address, then they are in one category. And then that's the best I could do, because otherwise it gets too overwhelming. But just start where you are and just try to make some sense out of it and some order out of it.
I have something I thought of. I thought about space, but in the absence of space, create a digital space. Create a spreadsheet, like, you know, Tanya, Autry has videotapes, and Joe Smith has photographs, and just make a list of all of the people who are offering you these things, and then at some point you could, like, maybe with that digital space say, like, I know that I need so many square feet of whatever, and maybe you can encourage White Plains or some organization to give you the space to collect those items, but you have to in some way represent that collection in the absence of actually holding the thing in your hand.
I also get a letter from them saying,
Right.
saying that they are giving it to you, loaning it to you, whatever they're doing, and have it notarized. So there's no issue when somebody dies or, you know, whatever happens.
But
the
even
divorce.
better, you create the letter and then have them sign it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they're not going to write the letter.
Yeah, right.
Very good.
Hello. I would like to know, how do you appreciate or have somebody appreciate your archives?
Like an
Appraisal.
Appraisal?
An appraisal.
Ooh, it costs money. I haven't done it yet. In terms of the whole archive, I haven't done it. I guess I know what somebody might pay because someone paid this for that or this for that, but the whole collection, I don't know.
I mean, how do you appreciate your archives? You know, how do you set a value on the particular collections in your archives?
Well, I'm saying I haven't set a value on the collection, but I might have a value for a particular print, or depending on whether it's a vintage print or a modern print, or, you know, the size of the print, or where it's whether it's going to be licensed or is it going to be going for sale in a museum. I used to do my own licensing, and now I use Artists' Rights Society to do that paperwork. So yeah, I'm still developing that way, you know.
Thank you.
We'll take this last question.
I'm Alana Cole. I'm a photographer, but also I recently got an interest in archiving, like in the last few years. And one of the questions that I have is, what are the things that you hope will develop as far as support for archivists, like specifically Black archivists, and your specific needs, our specific needs, as well as when you're archiving your work and, you know, families' work, how do you know what to keep and how do you know what to, you know, maybe let go of? Because I'm recently starting to do things with my family. Like, one of my uncles just turned 90, and I photographed his 90th birthday, and we have a lot of family history, and I'm trying to figure out what's to keep and what's to, like, you know, maybe let go of. So
depends on what let go means. I mean, I found some, I keep everything, But I found that I had some calendars with my image on it, and the calendar part had fallen off, and I was going to throw it away. And I was like, nah. So I went to Instagram and said, like, I have these calendars. If you just send me the postage, I'll send it to you. So that was my way of, letting it. Somebody wants it, and maybe it's not trash, but I don't need it in my space. Can I talk about what I did with this? I had some oversized. Should I talk about that?
Yeah.
I had some oversized contact sheets, which I thought that I was going to use. And I really didn't use it, and it wasn't really taking up a lot of space. But one of the things that I did is I was looking up FESTAC 77 and seeing what the Schomburg had, and I didn't see a whole lot. And I was like, somebody ought to do something about that. So I gave that set of contact sheets to the Schomburg. So, and it was a little bit. It wasn't like a whole mother load, so it was just a little bit of so somebody wants it. If you don't want it, somebody wants it. So you have to find out who that is. But I'm not a throwaway person. I'm going to repurpose or something.
Yes, thank you. Repurposing is probably better than just letting it go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Are you going to keep it nice and short for us?
I'll try my best.
Are you going to keep it nice and short for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good evening. We talked about appraising artwork, licensing, the value, financial, and also spiritual and emotional. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges very quickly? And let's say maybe Kwame, Kwame, you can go ahead. Just the challenges with the ease with which work is shared in this era, right? Work can be easily downloaded, reproduced, shared, sent, social media. The balance between letting things become viral and also maybe holding on to things in terms of value, how you've navigated that, what challenges, and maybe a strategy for creatives on how to navigate that.
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question. I think when you, one of the things that you have to be okay with, right? Instagram, like I said, is a platform that I use. You have to understand that somebody can take your photo and remix it. Someone can take your photo and put on a t-shirt without your permission, and you can go after them. But like, there are many different things that can happen. I went and did a search. There's the picture of the women outside the school. I was doing a search for something. I was looking, I forget what it was, and I was on Amazon, and I saw that image on canvas being sold out of a Chinese, like out of China. And I got Amazon on it, and they took it down. But the crazy thing was, it had my file name on the on the actual piece of work, and I was like, this is absolutely crazy. But I think you have to go into it with somewhat of an understanding. That's not going to hurt necessarily the fine art market. It might hurt, in the fact that there's now some mass produced. But I think what you have to do is understand, look, there's a risk when you put this up on here. Like I mentioned before, we're only 220 images in. When my father would talk about it, he would say in the hundreds of thousands. So, we're just scratching the surface. So there has to be a framework in the plan. So I hold back quite a lot. I don't release a lot of work intentionally, because what I'm trying to do is build one, awareness. We're working on a documentary. I want to save some stuff for that. There are things that we need to do to ensure that, we had a question about what happens in 100 years. If you release too much too soon, it's supply and demand. Like I said, I went to business school to make sure that I do this properly. So there's a supply and demand. So I feel like what you need to do is be comfortable what you're releasing, like understand, okay, this is, another artist might be inspired by it, right? And then all of a sudden you say, hey, this is interesting. But at the end of the day, I think you have to go into those decisions with the knowledge that this may happen, and just be comfortable enough to do that. I think if you're doing the right projects, like you're saying, your father's leading from up there, right? I think the beauty of what we've been experiencing is that things have been very natural. It's been like, okay, this is the right thing to do. This is the right direction we're gonna go. And for us now, it's like buckling down, archiving, doing some collaborations, and figuring out how to kind of get to that next phase, and really supporting younger artists that are along those same lines, that love us and show us in our beauty. So
when it comes down to who owns the image, you have the negative.
Right.
I mean, that's like the proof there. If you ever have to go against someone, not only do you have the negative, but you own the copyright, and hopefully you've registered the image so that that gives you additional protection.
Right.
Should somebody violate your copyright. And copyright simply means that the artist or the artist's estate has the exclusive right to copy that photograph from here to there. So if it's on a t-shirt and you didn't license it to the t-shirt maker, that person has violated your right of copy. That's all copyright means. And you can decide from there how you're going to handle that situation.
I want to say thank you to everyone in our audience for being so thoughtful and engaged in this conversation. I want to thank our panelists as well. We have some time in the lobby for book signing, so I definitely recommend asking if you have 1 or 2 questions then, because one of the questions that I want you to sort of follow up on there, Marilyn, is around your FESTAC photo that you had to eventually get the credit for because it was being used, right? In many different places. And so if you all get a chance to chat with her, hear that particular story, because I think the same thing was happening with Austin Hanson, who's a photographer whose collections we have here in the collection, in our photography collection. And his photos have been used numerous times in newspapers and definitely in the New York Times. And eventually someone went to them and said, these are Austin Hanson photos. Like, these aren't just stock photos from nowhere. Someone composed these images, or they were paid for, or what have you. And so I think this is a problem, and this is an interesting question for before and for now and for the future. And this idea of holding back and also knowing what you put out there may be out of your reach for some time, but also if you put in some time, you can also do some work to ensure that you're credited or paid accordingly. With that said, thank you all so much for being with us. Both Last Day in Lagos as well as Black is Beautiful is available in our Schomburg shop. I advise going over there before they close, book signing afterwards. Thank you all for being such an incredible panel. Have a good night.